Okay, so Todd will give the details on some of these reservoirs, but we just wanted to show how, with the past wet spring and winter, most of our reservoirs are at or slightly above their target pools for this time of year. And we'll start off with Georgia there in Lake Lanier. It's at its summer target pool or near it, 1071. Carter's Lake, Lake Allatoona, all these Corps of Engineer lakes right at their target pool. We go east to South Carolina and we look here and we can see the Savannah Project, Hartwell, Russell, Thurman, all near their target pools, and Lake Watering, Lake Murray, the two hydropower lakes, both at their right at their target pools. And then in North Carolina, the Corps of Engineer lakes, Kerr, Scott, Falls, Jordan, all very near their target pools. Falls actually running a little higher, and Todd will show that one here shortly, and then Lake Normal near their target pool.
Now let's look at some specific reservoirs. Here's Lake Lanier, and Lake Lanier has stayed near its guide curve since the beginning of the year. It was actually probably been like that for the last year or so, but now just based on climatology and where we are, you can see that the orange line shows the historical median elevation, and they're showing that the forecast is for it to start falling like that. And we've had more normal rainfall in the last week or two. It's actually been a little bit dry, so that's the reason it's starting to fall. And again, normally during this time of year, if we don't see significant rainfall, our evapotranspiration rates outweigh the normal rainfall. So we would expect reservoirs to start falling. We would expect rivers to be to start to fall a little bit. So this is expected during this time of year. Here's Lake Hartwell on the Savannah River. Again, for years during the 2000s, we were seeing it far below normal, where we're seeing it in the very low range. But over the last year, we have actually seen it much above normal, which is great, above the guide curve, and we're currently above the guide curve. It does look like, based on being a little bit drier, that it is going to start falling out here anytime. As for Falls Lake up in Neuse River, Jeff talked about that just a little bit ago, and recent rainfalls has raised the pool. We had some good inflows into that reservoir, and it takes it all so that it controls flooding downstream, and it's risen and will start to fall back and get close to guide curve as we get closer to summer. But it's above normal. Again, that's what they're there for, and these reservoirs that the Corps manages. And then we head down south to Lake Okeechobee. Now, we're just coming out of their dry season. We've moved into their wet season. It usually starts around May 15th, or climatologically it starts around May 15th. And they are starting to see a little bit more rainfall. So we'll be watching to see if we do start to see those rains fall and we start to see that pool rise. But that's why, as opposed to what you saw on the other reservoirs, where we typically start falling during this time of year, it's wet season in that central and south Florida. So we should start to see that pool rise through the summer months.
Our main concern as the short term is this area of low pressure currently off to the west of the region. This area of low pressure is going to move slowly eastward in the next several days, and what we're looking at here is model simulation for Friday morning. See that low centered roughly over Louisiana. This low is going to continue to bring moisture up into Mississippi and Alabama, and this is where we're going to see our heaviest precipitation in the next few days. Further east, we are in more of a split flow regime with that subtropical jet stream further south and the polar jet well to our north. And so further east of that low, we're going to see more in the way of ordinary thunderstorms, daytime thunderstorms, typical for this time of year. Looking into the midterm, we see that that area of low pressure fills in and we're left with this split flow regime. This is one model simulation, and looking at another model simulation, we see a very similar pattern, split flow in between those two jet streams. So during this period, again, expect more in the way of just normal thunderstorms, typical of what we expect for this time of year. Looking at the 7-day accumulated precipitation, see the highest precipitation amounts down near that low pressure center, especially in the Mobile area. And the further east you get into more of the contributions from just those ordinary daytime thunderstorms. From Georgia further east, amounts generally between half an inch and an inch and a half of precip for that 7-day total. Looking into the long term, we're expecting above average precipitation amounts across most of the southeast. There are a lot of model differences out of this range, but one thing consistent between the models is a ridge of high pressure off to the west, which will make thunderstorms more likely on its periphery over our area in the southeast.
So now let's take a look at the 2014 Atlantic hurricane season outlook. And right now it looks like named storms will have 8 to 13. The average is around 12, somewhere in that 11 to 12 range. So again, it shows a little bit below normal just because that range is down. Hurricanes, they're expecting 3 to 6 this year, and average is 6 during a normal year. And major hurricanes, they're showing 1 to 2, and we usually, on an average year, have, they say 2.2, so just a little bit above 2, all depending. So that means 2 to 3 at some point. So that's what they're expecting for this year. Below normal, a 50% chance of below normal hurricane season, a 40% chance of near normal, and then still a 10% chance of above normal. And part of that is because we're still in an active period. We started that about 20 years ago, back in 1995, and we've been active in that whole time. And, just looking into last year, we forecast for a very active year, and it wasn't active because the circumstances changed during the season and we became inactive. Well, the same thing could happen opposite here, where something happens that we become more active during the hurricane season. We'll just see. Right now, everything indicates that we're going to be below normal. And here's some of those factors. One of them is El Nino, and how we can tell we have an El Nino. You look at the black box over the Pacific Ocean, and that black box is showing warmer than normal temperatures over the Pacific. Now, those warmer than normal temperatures indicate that we're moving into a El Nino, and typically during El Nino years, we have less storms that are able to develop in the Atlantic Basin. Another factor going into this is that as you look at the green box up in the right-hand corner of each map, you'll see that we have below normal temperatures in the Atlantic. Now, we need warm temperatures in the Atlantic Ocean for storms to develop. It's more conducive to having storms develop, and with cooler than normal temperatures, that's one other factor that will keep it from developing. So here's kind of the conditions expected during that time. You can see that wind shear, which tends to cut down storms. You need a perfect environment for hurricanes to develop in the Atlantic Ocean. So a lot of times no wind shear, nothing to push the tops of that hurricane over. They need to stack up on top of each other so that we get an eye. And so with shear, possible much more shear than normal, then it would tend to suggest it would tear them apart before they ever got started. A less favorable African easterly wave, and with stronger trade winds, so which means it'll move pretty quickly, but with the wind shear from the east, most likely it would tear those things apart. So we are expecting an El Nino, and it is starting to warm, as we showed on the temperature in the last slide. But as you can see, the red shows El Nino and our chances for an El Nino. And by the August, September, October timeframe, when we're getting into the middle of hurricane season, there's over a 70% chance of having some sort of El Nino, whether weak, moderate, or strong during that time. And so, and La Nina we're not expecting, and the neutral conditions only a 21% chance of. So, and then that even gets stronger as we get further later into the year. So that's why we're looking in the prediction of El Nino to impact the hurricane season. And this is why, there's still that chance that we could have an active hurricane season, and that our multi-decadal signal since 95 shows, we've had warmer than normal ocean temperatures. Everything's been kind of set up so that we'll be more active. And now those things have kind of flip-flopped. Now, whether that's a long-term change or whether it's just a 1-year or 2-year change, we'll have to see. But right now, those things aren't in place, not nearly like what they have been, and that's why we're going for below normal. And this is the forecast as compared to where we've been over the last 20 years or so. This kind of gives you a feel for where we are with respect to with our forecast with respect to the last since 1950. And so now Jeff will talk a little bit about our tropical outlook with respect to the southeast.